So we've got one package and one non-anime DVD, which would be Adventure Time Season 4. Actually, pretty fun season. I think there's an easier way to do this. Find the pull here, pull there. Voila. And now everything's spilling out, but that's okay, because now it's all here. So why don't we begin with this? We got Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Season 1. 6 DVDs. 4K Media Inc. Is that for kids? I'm trying to look for the number of episodes. It's kind of hard to find out, so maybe we'll have to look at it. There's a possibility that the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX stuff I had before already was contained in these, but I already learned my lesson with the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Release. This goes up to 52 episodes on these 3 things, and I guess I don't have my other Yu-Gi-Oh! GX stuff out. That one goes up to, what was it? Was it 26 episodes maybe? Could have been 52. This could either be more or an overlap. I think either is okay, especially since, as you can see, that's a partial picture. That's a partial picture, which means that the precaution was good. There's going to be more, assuming there's more released, this is going to be like the first, well, I guess it's technically the second Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, but the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series that made it popular here in the States, at least. That one had the imagery on the side, so even if there was overlap with what I had before, significant in that case, since I had everything but the 4th season, I think. And that's because the 4th season was not completely released until that DVD release. Blah, 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 blah. Basically, I'll continue purchasing these, and I don't know if I'll find out for certain, or rather when I'll find out for certain. Let's see. Next we got Naruto Shippuden DVD set 20. All the way up to episode 257. I recall the last episode or 2 of the previous set, they were finally getting away from a lot of the filler stuff and into some of the more relevant concepts. And they hadn't quite gotten too far into that, but it was one of those things where they made the manga first, now you can make the story last. Not as in final, but last as in stay around for a while. Nothing too complicated about the discs in this set, but that's to be expected. Next we have the Blu-ray version of Kill Me Baby, which is English dubbed, Japanese subtitled. I'm trying to remember if the previous one was dubbed, but now I think about it, it's going to be buried pretty deep, so hard to. And Region A only. I don't know for certain. All I know is, hey, it's the Blu-ray copy of Kill Me Baby. And last but not least, Meganebu DVD and Blu-ray versions. I'm not seeing a number on the side. I'm looking for something that says complete collection. Includes all 12 episodes. There we go. I see only Japanese, Region A. So Japanese with English subtitles only, Region A only. I don't know much about what this series is about. Tricky to tell without actually reading, just by looking at it. In the back here, I'm trying to process what exactly that person is. They've got such a wide variety of colors. tricky to tell. I think this is one I don't want to judge based on the cover, I guess. I want to, okay, so this is an unusual Sentai setup. 2 discs only. I mean, that's not unusual. They've been experimenting with a lot of 2-disc releases lately anyways. But they don't have the flip thing in the middle, which actually is kind of good because I think that made it kind of flimsy. Whereas this one appears to just be the one disc. Interesting. I'm trying to look in the back where it says number of discs, but I'm not seeing anything. Because usually they say all 12 episodes on 2 discs or something like that. 2 DVD set. So it looks like it just doesn't say that. But as you can see, disc 1 had the same artwork as the Blu-ray disc. And it looks like that's this week's anime DVD collection update. Not as big as last week, but last week did have a little overlap with previous week's stuff. Some of the stuff that arrived late. And I know this week there were 2 things that are kind of questionable in terms of arrival. No. 2 things that I think were released this week in theory. One of which, okay, I know for certain that it arrived. It was just delivered by the Postal Service, so of course it was in the mailbox, and I couldn't get to it because HR had already left. But I wasn't really tracking it because main stuff came UPS, and UPS delivers not only early in the morning, but they deliver to our shipping area so that it gets sorted out just fine. Whereas, okay, and I think that one was an NIS release of some sort. Oh yeah, the movie for... I can't remember its name. I remember what it's about, and I never finished that. I really should. The other thing was, I think, Holy Night, which is a Media Blaster release. You know, released under the name Anime Works. And I'm trying to find out if it actually did get released, if there's actually copies out there, because Media Blaster tends to be delayed. So I'm monitoring that and keeping an eye on it. Other than that, I guess tomorrow's when I'll be buying all my November stuff. And there is one concern I have, and that's there's listings on Amazon for Super Smash Bros. Wii U, but they don't seem as certain that they'll be getting the GameCube bundle version. And their separate GameCube controller and GameCube controller adapter listings state December 31st or something like that, which was, I think, their original estimate for when it was coming out. So there could be some elements of that where either Amazon has not received updated details, or maybe Nintendo is releasing the game itself early, but we have to wait for the GameCube adapter, which I certainly hope we don't. But I guess I'll be figuring out and making a decision on how I'm going to do that, because obviously with all the Super Smash Bros. I've been playing, I'm prioritizing thinking about that. And it'll be interesting to see if that continues to be the case, because as the end of this month gets closer and closer, we're going to see the release of Bayonetta 2, I believe, and hopefully the 3rd Shantae game. And I only played the first one, so I need to play the second one, so I may have a bit of a video game backlog building up that's not likely to go away as long as I'm continuing to play Smash Brothers. But that should tell you a lot. I played Smash Brothers, so I didn't prioritize the watching of a lot of anime. I did watch Adventure Time Season 4, mostly because Season 3 ended at a kind of cliffhanger. It was interesting to see how Season 4 played off of that. And at the same time, lots of interesting things. I've heard the Bacon Pancake song before, and remixes of that, and it's great to get through that. I think I also knew a certain reveal that was going to happen in the 4th season. I just didn't know it was the 4th season. I just I guess I heard about it a long time ago and was waiting for it to eventually happen. It's one of those little things that make people feel like the series is deeper. And then, of course, another cliffhanger at the end of the 4th season, which is all good. It was expected. I was warned in advance that this cliffhanger would be worse. And in my opinion, I'm actually slightly more okay with this one than the last one, and I guess I don't want to go into details of why. In fact, I'm talking about this longer than I intended. Anime. Let's see. I watched the 14th Dragon Ball Z movie, and I think I've talked before about when it came to my preferences for the older 13 Dragon Ball Z movies, I really liked the first 2 the best, and then from the 3rd on was when it started being more about power levels than anything else. It wasn't until 12 and 13 when they started reasonably convincing me that the bad guys were actually super ridiculously powerful. Number 12, well, 13 didn't convince me of that, but 13 did instead have a story to it, which it tried to tell a story which the previous ones had not. The previous ones were just, oh, a bad guy showed up out of nowhere, and now the Z Warriors have to try and fight him. Oh, they're not succeeding. Something happens, and now they're able to succeed. Something along those lines. And again, I like movies 1 and 2 more than the rest because movie 1 is that one is really neat in terms of, kind of feels like them fighting is still a relevant thing, and then there's still more mystery and whatnot. Whereas movie 2 is kind of the balance between how Dragon Ball Z started powering up the characters, but just before it went so out of control where it's like, it's all about Saiyans, that's all it's about. Because in movie 2, you still had Master Roshi fighting and Krillin fighting. I mean, he tries to fight in other movies, but he did some serious stuff. It feels like in movie 2, a lot of the characters who, as fighters, would normally not be relevant were pretty relevant. And then after that, Dragon Ball Z started becoming, okay, now Goku's becoming the most powerful thing in the universe, blah, blah, blah. And again, they became repetitive because of that, because of, sorry. If I'm a little repetitive, I'm a little sleepy. But movie 14, Battle of Gods, what was neat about that was either they learned a lesson from 13 or they just saw everything else before that and they're like, okay, we should just accept the fact that we've made Goku so powerful, so ridiculously powerful that we can't we've written ourselves into a corner in terms of fights. We have to stop focusing on fights. And so a lot of the 14th movie is instead about things that happen. It's story, sort of like the 13th movie, and I think that was a great direction. It's hard for me to tell if it was good story or not. I actually thought it was pretty okay. I think I enjoyed it more than movies 12 and 13. So there's this interesting thing where 12 had a convincing bad guy, 13 had a neat story, 14 has an even more interesting story. Character interactions are also very... Yeah, I just don't know how to describe all of it. Because the other thing that was really weird about watching it is before the movie came out, you would watch Dragon Ball, then Dragon Ball Z, and then all Dragon Ball Z movies, and then you'd go on to Dragon Ball GT. And GT, of course, is not written by Akira Toriyama, so it is essentially a high-budget fan fiction. It kind of feels like it when you think about it. Things about it that are okay, neat, but others which are like, You're having to tell me that this character is more powerful than Boo in order for me to know it, because they don't feel like it. They don't feel like they should be. And so, of course, here it was like... It felt weird and out of place because at the same time, it has to take place between those conceptual places. And then, of course, the really weird thing was Dragon Ball Z movie 14 suddenly had Emperor Pilaf coming out of nowhere. And for those of you who have watched Dragon Ball GT, that's how GT kind of started as well. Now, movie 14 didn't start that way. It just happened in there, but it was an interesting, maybe not a coincidence. It could be one of those things where Akira Toriyama felt like he probably needed to reintroduce an old character. Sort of like how in Dragon Ball GT, they're like, you know, we went through all Dragon Ball Z and we've completely forgotten about this villain that was the first villain of Dragon Ball, which was Emperor Pilaf. So, I don't know. That was interesting. And the battling, I wouldn't say was particularly spectacular, but it definitely had an interesting twist to it. And I don't think some of the lore behind it was necessarily great, but some of the universe building I thought was actually interesting, and how they kind of left themselves open to potentially make future movies if they wanted to. So it should be interesting to see what happens from here, because I think I've heard a movie 15 is in the works, and I'm actually curious about it. So I'd say that Dragon Ball Z movie 14, Battle of Gods, was pretty decently a pretty decent success. I mean, Dragon Ball Z is probably the prime example of a series that writes itself into a corner, and I feel like they're recovering from it slightly better. They're still stuck there, but making interesting progress. So let's see. After that, I watched the Rosen Maiden, the new Rosen Maiden series that arrived last week. There's a lot of interesting things in my piles of stuff to watch, and I'm not entirely sure why I chose that one, other than maybe I felt like watching anime, and I felt like watching something I was kind of familiar with. And well, that series is definitely really hard to start, because that first episode is designed to be a sort of, oh yeah, you remember this? Oh yeah, you remember this? It's not as good of an introduction to a lot of the concepts involved as maybe it thought it was being, and it was kind of tricky to follow, because it wasn't exactly the same things that happened in the first Rosen Maiden. There were some things that were conceptually along the same line, so I think we're supposed to piece together what was canonical from the first series based on very brief events in the first episode of this new Rosen Maiden. But after that, it actually took a turn for the better. You know, not one of those things where it's definitely spectacular, awesome, wow, everybody's going to like it, but interestingly, it went into an alternative universe where the main character did not meet the Rosen Maidens, and so this was a chance to see his future without those events, essentially. And the interesting thing about that is this was him when he was college age. And as you might know, a lot of anime tend to be focused on middle, high school age sort of kids, mostly because I think in Japanese culture that's when people have a bit more freedom in their life. When they reach adulthood, usually they're not as free. And there's usually a reason the anime has for choosing that demographic if they're trying to appeal to an age group that might have normally been the other ones. And this seems sort of like that. It's sort of welcome to the NHK-ish in terms of looking at a damaged individual. Although this June is far less crazy and far more quiet and cynical, I guess. So it was very interesting watching that and having some sympathy for him, and seeing things kind of unfold that way, I guess. But therein lies kind of the issue with the original two Rosen Maiden series. I say original, I should say first, because this one may be more following the manga or canonical or something like that. So with the first series, the older ones, they I think it was easier to follow because they gave you mysteries, things to be revealed, and it felt like there was more involvement in the Alice game that the Rosen Maiden dolls are playing. Whereas with the new one, it seems like kind of a presence, Alice game stuff, except that it's not immediately obvious that there's any real problem, because it kind of, once it goes to college June and then Rosen Maidens from another universe are kind of becoming involved, it doesn't feel like there's as much importance once that happens. Before then, you kind of get that feeling, but then it reaches a stalemate where it's more how his life develops after that encounter, I suppose. And mostly the characters are waiting for something. And that's where you're like, okay, I'm not entirely sure what about the story is supposed to drive me back. The character development and interactions are doing a pretty good job of keeping me there, but at the same time, it seems to be dangling this thing that's supposed to be a lure for something is going to happen, but it's hard to care about that, and it feels like you're kind of being jerked around or something like that. So, it's not a complete feeling, I guess. It feels a little off. And even worse, it kind of ends on a cliffhanger, so unless there's more of it, it's another one of those series which may be a bit incomplete. Now, I watched this one English dubbed, and it's hard to really say what I think about it because I still look at some of the Rose Maidens and I think I'm still expecting their Japanese voices, so I can't judge the English dub all that well. Especially since Suisei Seki probably ends every sentence with Desu like she did in the first series, and of course she doesn't do that in the English dubs, so I don't know. I wouldn't call that a waste of my time having watched the English dub and maybe preferring Japanese with subtitles, but it was an experience. I don't know if this is useful stuff to talk about. And so, after all that, I watched one episode of Golden Time. Is that what it was? Yes, it's right there, Golden Time. And I'm still not sure what to think about it. I don't like the fact that the girl on the cover of the anime, who I'm assuming is somewhat more important than other girls introduced in the series in the first episode at least, the first thing we see of her is him physically assaulting a guy. And then she tries to say, well, it could have been worse because I took all the thorns out of this rose. But it's like, am I supposed to feel sympathetic for this person? She seems to be controlling, physically abusive, mentally abusive, just... and then our main character is a hopeless white knight who, without even knowing her, is like, oh no, she's definitely not this controlling person. And like, the first thing you saw of her was she hit some guy in public with a bushel of roses. And how can you say from there that you know anything about her, especially that she's not any of these things this guy is saying? That said, it's interesting that, at least for now, she's interested in the other guy, and so you got an interesting little setup there. And then, to additional female characters that were introduced, it'll be interesting to see what they're about, because as it is now, we haven't seen a whole lot of either of them, just brief introductions, and I think it was starting to reveal some of what should make the main character interesting, but it didn't show a whole lot because it was supposed to be a cliffhanger at the end of the first episode sort of thing. Where maybe we'll be getting some interesting information about something. Unless I lost track of things. That's always possible because with all the Super Smash Brothers, sometimes I don't track anime too well. If I were to give a Super Smash Brothers update, I'm trying to get all the challenges, which of course means you pretty much do everything with everyone, and I think I've done all the stadium related stuff, so home run contest and multi-man melee and target blast. I've done the street smash stuff. I've gone through classic with all the characters. I've gone through all-star with 30 of the characters. And I've gone through it on hard mode as well. So that more or less just leaves a handful of things involving smash runs, playing classic on 9.0 difficulty, which could be tricky because of that thing, and finishing this all-star stuff, I guess. I think those are the three major things, and then there's a handful of minor things that obviously you don't get really fast. Like, get all the costumes and parts and whatnot. Obviously, that one's not done, especially since some of them still need to be unlocked from the challenges. And I haven't checked to see how all the characters are doing in terms of all their custom moves. So there's that stuff. And then there's walk 31 miles. There's play multiplayer for 50 hours. You know, basically handful stuff. So in terms of Smash, I've done a pretty good job of getting through most of what I want to do, and then I don't know. I guess after that, other video games. So there we go. I guess that's the update for everything. So y'all have a nice week.